roughly a year since Rob and I made our first review podcast where we covered the excellent first season of Netflix Castlevania. With the second season coming out on October 26th, we figured it'd be worthwhile to revisit the series and make a sort of wish list for improvements and stuff we'd like to see in the new season. Now, if you haven't watched our review of Season 1, don't worry. So this video will address the major critiques we had and in a sense be a spoiler and Rob-free TLDR version. You know, just short and frickin' sweet, but at the same time, not really. So here we go. These are 3 things we are hoping to get in Castlevania Season 2. Our main complaint about Season 1 was the metric shit ton of talking that ate up nearly all the show's runtime. We wrote off most of the dialogue as being exposition heavy, nothing more than Spanish wizard gypsies and British-sounding Romanian people talking a bunch instead of doing anything worthwhile. Now, all this dialogue should have been expected. I mean, the series was just starting and needed a way to world build, but at times it seemed that scenes of exposition transitioned into other scenes of exposition, resulting in a kind of exposition cocktail, if you will, that didn't really sit too well with us. I will be honest and say that my attitude towards the perceived amount of exposition in Season 1 has changed with the second watching. I don't know if it's because I watched it by myself the second time or what, but it didn't seem to drag on as much as I remember, and I felt compelled to go on to the next episode no matter how much dialogue was in the previous one. What is still apparent is that there is a deficit of fight scenes in the first season. Now, since everyone's motivations have been established, it'd be reasonable to assume that more action will occur in the second season, granted not too many new characters are introduced or anything that would require a significant amount of explanation. Rob and I will be sure to touch on this when we make our review after release, and I doubt we'll be any less critical if the series continues to favor extended dialogue over fights or anything interesting like that. Another thing that there was a deficit of in the first season was pirates, or more specifically, a lack of a certain pirate hell-bent on killing Dracula for the murder of his rebel friends or something. The pirate in question is Grant Dynasty, who is the only playable character from Dracula's Curse to not appear in the Netflix series. Yet. This is what we considered to be our biggest complaint about the first season. And while in hindsight I don't think it hampered it as much as excessive dialogue, it is still an omission worthy of mentioning. Now, let me first say that if they wanted to leave out a character from the game, Grant would be an obvious choice. His story isn't very consequential in the grand scheme of the series, and they'd also have to put a decent amount of work into the character to develop a meaningful backstory for him. However, for the sake of a faithful adaptation, they need Grant. It just wouldn't be Castlevania 3 without him. I mean, as an added bonus, it'd win the approval of the angry video game nerd himself, who was likewise critical of the lack of Grant in Season 1. Just whatever you do, Netflix Castlevania team, don't model his character off of the emo mummy version from Judgment. And also leave out the pointless, shitty love triangle thing from that game too. Please. For a moment, let's look at everyone's favorite Castlevania sub-series, Lords of Shadow.
Please clap.
One common complaint that I've heard from people, regardless of whether they enjoyed the gameplay or story, is that none of the 3 Lords of Shadow games feel like Castlevania. Having recently played each game, I personally attribute this to 2 things. 1, a lack of classic music tracks like Vampire Killer or Bloody Tears, and 2, very few classic monsters. Season 1 unfortunately also lacked these things, and I fear that the Netflix series will overall not have the Castlevania feel if Season 2 follows suit. When you boil it all down, I mean, there's not that much that distinguishes Netflix Castlevania from your average dark fantasy show. Monsters are just generic demon things, and the soundtrack is no different from a regular movie or TV show score. And these qualities are not what you would find in a typical Castlevania game, like not even close. This is an easy fix though. Start with a few more fight scenes like we mentioned earlier, add classic monsters to those fight scenes, like Medusa heads, blood skeletons, axe armors, frozen halves. Then you back them all up with an orchestral rendition of a classic song like Beginning or Aquarius. It's easy. That's how you get the Castlevania feel. So there's that. Please share your thoughts on our video and anything you'd like to see in Castlevania Season 2 in the comments below. As October approaches, be on the lookout for more Castlevania vids from the legal Pancakes. be prepared for a review of Season 2 that will be as in-depth as two guys with absolutely no background in film study can provide. It'll be pretty great. Until then, this is just food for thought. So eat up, you fuck.